Crouch. Bind. Set.
Joe presents the House of Rugby, together with Guinness.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of House of Rugby Shorts, brought to you by Joe, together with our very good friends at Guinness. Hope you're all well. Hope we are edging towards life perhaps getting back to normal a little bit, and it's hopefully not too far away that we might get some sport back on our screens and back into our lives, and a chance today to have a chat with a man who is, well, I suppose, part of what makes sport happen. It's a great pleasure to welcome Rob Cross to House of Rugby Shorts. Those of you who have seen these episodes before will know it's a little bit shorter, a little bit sharper, a little bit quieter without Haskins. Just a chance to have a great chat with people around the game and to pick their brains, get their thoughts, and find out the lie of the land. So let's just introduce Rob before we do anything else. A level 6 referee, vice president of the Oxfordshire Referees Society. And Rob, we're going to be talking about some of the challenges, I suppose, that referees face at the weekends. We've heard a lot about player numbers and player engagement, etc. But obviously no games happen without the refs themselves. We'll talk about the pathway for new referees as well. And also, perhaps slightly concerningly, the decreasing numbers of those who are prepared to officiate on a Saturday and a Sunday. So lots of topics to get into. Very nice to have you on the show, albeit the fact you're sitting in front of a dirty Leicester shirt.
Yeah, I did think that was going to be dangerous doing it. So I should have thought to probably change decorations in the room prior to having any kind of Skype conversation, shouldn't I? So apologies for that. Yeah,
no, that's all right. We'll let you off for now. We may come back to that depending on how this conversation goes. How are you first and foremost, though, Rob? How is life with you right now?
Yeah, it's not bad. It's kind of strange. I actually travel a lot with work quite often during the week. So going from being away for a couple of days every week to literally having not left the house from that side of things really for 3 months, bit of a shock to the system.
What do you do? What is the day job?
Accountant by trade for my sins. Someone has to be.
A referee and an accountant. I'm going to put you in the bracket with a taxman and a parking warden.
Yeah, no one's ever happy to see me, to be quite honest. I think it trains me well for the refereeing side of things, though, knowing that, when you turn up, I started out as an auditor, and no one ever likes an auditor turning up. So from that point of view, it was, it was off to a strong start in preparing myself for the fun that comes in the middle of a pitch on a Saturday or Sunday as needed as well. So
it's really lovely to have you on, and we don't often shine the light on referees, although, remarkably, we've had Nigel Owens on recently, and it's great to have yourself. How did you get into it? How did you become a referee, and why reffing, as many people want to be players? Why did you end up with the whistle?
So I started off playing when I was 7 years old. My dad had played rugby for many years. It's the sport I grew up on, if you like. So he's also the one I have to thank for the terrible choice of Tigers as a team to follow. But yeah, so I got him played at school, played for a club, qualified as a ref when I was 14 years old. So at that time, pretty unusual, pretty young to be doing it. Less so now, I guess. But it's something I actually got into because I did the Duke of Edinburgh's award. And for me, it was a way of actually doing my community service part of that award. So qualified as a ref, went down to my local rugby club and helped out on a Sunday morning with their junior setup. So under 9s, under 10s, under 11s at Birmingham and Solihull Rugby Club. Then when I was sort of 17, 18 in upper 6th at school, second team captain, a role that's only ever given to someone who's not good enough to get in the first team is the way I looked at it. So always knew that playing was never going to be my absolute forte. And I got injured. The old boys club from school offered to give me a couple of games as I was coming back from injury. It was an arm injury, so I was still able to get around. Enjoyed that perhaps more than I was enjoying the playing, and decided actually, I'll stick with this. So as I went to uni, stopped really playing apart from the occasional entertaining outing of a sevens team or whatever else, and refereed through uni. And then when I sort of headed home back up to Birmingham at the time, I took up the whistle with the local society and sort of went from there, really starting from the bottom and working the way up. So.
That's quite a journey, and I'm fascinated. You started it as part of your Duke of Edinburgh award. That's I've not heard of people who've done that before. So, what age? I suppose at age 14, are you refereeing similar age groups? You're not thrust into vets games at that age, I presume.
No, so there's now actually a proper sort of young match official program or YMO program that runs in a lot of the societies and is something that's very much encouraged by the RFU. And so you get a lot more of those individuals coming in and at that sort of age group, 14, 15, 16, and they're absolutely refereeing their own age groups, and that's how they develop their experience through those years doing their Sunday morning games, appointed by the society. But from that point of view, looking at it to be able to get their experience in more of a comfort zone, because it's more of their sort of age groups, etc. And then sort of that means by the time you hit 18 and you're allowed to referee the adult rugby, then at that point, hopefully you've honed a number of the skills that you need that are very transferable into the adult games. And you kind of develop it from there, really, I guess, in terms of then sort of getting the lower level second and third team games, your vets games, that sort of thing, and get people down watching you, building your skill set up as you go through, and try and push you up the ranks into the first teams and into the leagues, and from there, really.
Tell me what kind of a ref you are. Are you a Nigel Owens and you make for a great game? Are you an Alan Rowland and you know the law book to the greatest detail? Are you a Clive Norling and always 25 yards behind play? What are you as a referee? How would people describe you?
I'm going to hope that it's not the latter, although I'm sure there's some people that will tell me otherwise. But no, I think I'm probably lean more towards the Nigel Owens side of things. I think it was actually really interesting when Nigel was on the other week. Hask was talking about the style of referees when they come into a changing room. And the fact that you've got those guys that actually build a bond, and it's very much an us kind of environment, not a them and us environment. And for me, that's really, really important. I don't want players ever thinking that I'm there trying to nitpick, trying to be a difficult referee or anything like that. And I do think that starts from the minute you arrive at a club. That first impression, I'm fortunately in Oxfordshire. I've been to most of the clubs. I know most of the guys around. So when I see those guys, they're sometimes happy, sometimes less so to see me. But at least you've kind of got a little bit of a rapport going. But I mean, one of the things that's great, and particularly is when I sort of first started out, was going on exchange. Up to anywhere from Newcastle in the northeast down to Devon and Cornwall in the southwest, and you turn up to a new club and you've got no sort of rapport there. You're very much your first impression counts a huge amount. So I think it's always important to come across as being a bit more relaxed, engage in a conversation, and be a bit more personable. On the pitch, of course, there's time and place for everything, isn't there? You work as a team on the pitch as well. You need the captains working with you. You need that sort of almost like a little team of three between you and the two captains. And I think if you go in too hard and too strict, then you lose that kind of ability to use those as a tool in your management. There's always going to be a law you don't know, so there's no point trying to claim that you know them all. You'll only get caught out somewhere along the way.
It's interesting. I want to get into the detail and I suppose the lie of the land for refs anyway, but I just was thinking about Wayne Barnes, who I don't think he went to New Zealand for 10 years off the back of that quarter-final in 2007. There are parts of Bristol and perhaps suburbs of Tiverton where your name is mud because of incidents that have gone before, or if you've got pretty good relationship with the clubs and the games and the people you've refed?
Thankfully, memories are fairly short at the grassroots level. Certainly, there have been occasions, I won't name clubs specifically for fear of the ties being slashed next time I'm there, but it certainly when you've had a better game or not so good game, and any coach that thinks that a referee always thinks that they've had a great game is naive, really, because we're probably our own harshest critics, because from our point of view, we're there to facilitate a game of rugby. But certainly there have been occasions where, you go back to a club, perhaps a few weeks after a particular game where there was, some kind of incident, and you're always a little bit in trepidation of, are they going to still be engaged in the same way? Are they still going to take me at sort of face value and treat me as they would have done previously? And to be honest, I always get amazed by actually how they do just go, new slate, let's start again. And I think it's they look at trends. If you're constantly the problem child, then maybe there's perhaps more of it. I'd like to think that that's not the case of how clubs feel about me, but ultimately, you always know there will be an occasion, almost without doubt, that you'll have made a mistake that to them is the biggest mistake. And I'll hold my hands up and say there have been a couple of occasions where I've come away from a club going, yeah, could have dealt with that differently. But the key thing is hoping that you haven't influenced the outcome of the game and the right team wins, right? I mean, that's that. You want the rugby to be the star, nothing else, and you don't want to be the centre of attention ultimately.
Yeah, well said. And I love your sort of philosophy on it, and it is part of what makes the game, isn't it? I'd love absolutely. To know. Given you started at age 14, I'm guessing you're a shade over 21 now, so I won't put years. I won't put years on it. But given how long you've been in the game, what sort of change in perception have you seen towards refereeing and referees? I mean, I use the old analogy of refs were once in a bucket with a taxman and parking wardens, but actually there is a group now in the Premiership, the likes of Luke Pearce, etc., who are really, really good at what they do. And there is Nigel, who's obviously transcends the sport. There's Wayne Barnes, who's a great character in his own right. And it feels as if referees have earned a lot more respect, perhaps over the last 10, 15, 20 years. The game has never happened without them, but they're far more sort of accepted. I don't mean accepted. What's the word I mean? They're far more appreciated, I think is the word I'm looking for. Is that something you've noticed in the journey that you've been on?
Yeah, probably. I think also the quality of the refereeing at the top levels has improved because of the professionalism, in the same way as if you think back to 20 years ago and the developing professional game from a playing point of view, you've got the same kind of transition coming through in the refereeing side of things. And so certainly I think it helps that more and more of the top guys in the refereeing circles are those that have been there and done it. Generally, the development of refereeing has benefited a group, Grassroots, as well. And I think you do see better development of individuals. I think there's much more support network around refereeing now. I don't think it's perhaps the one man on his own isolated kind of approach that perhaps it was once. Unfortunately, there is still the challenge around sort of getting people in and people seeing it as an attractive option in terms of alternative to playing or after playing. The challenge is if you don't have a referee, it's not just when Chris was on from Harborne a few weeks back, he was talking about 1 week he can have 50 players and the next week he's got 25.
Yeah.
The problem is if you lose one referee, it doesn't matter whether you've got 50 players or 25 at a club. There's a game that's not going to happen, and that's 30 odd players on a given afternoon or morning or whatever who aren't getting their game as a result of it. And I think as a society, we always want to fill every game that we get asked to fill. The reality is we physically can't do it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Chris Keir. We had a good chat with him, and it was fascinating to get the lie of the land at grassroots level. I suppose there are several places to take this. What are the numbers of referees like at the moment? I mean, how many people are coming up through the ranks? How hard is it to retain people? What are the processes and I suppose the organisations that keep referees in the game? For me, you have to remember there's different reasons for people being a referee. There's those who are looking at this as a pathway to kind of almost professionalism in sport. You've got the guys who come in and their drive is to be the next Wayne Barnes, to be the next Nige. From that point of view, you can have the characters who want to get all the way through, but then there's also that community referee who's actually just quite happy turning up on a Saturday afternoon at his local club, refereeing a second team game because it gets him out and running around. And neither of those pathways are really defined as well as they could be. I think it's sort of society dependent. I started off my refereeing career up in North Midlands, which was it's quite a big area. North Midlands being sort of everything from Hereford through to sort of North Shropshire and including all of Birmingham. So they've got a huge area to cover, and therefore, doing things like a pathway, having training sessions and that sort of thing becomes a lot harder for them just because of the geographical spread that they're covering. We're quite lucky in Oxfordshire. It's quite a small society. It's quite a small area to cover. So we can probably do a slightly different development approach to a big area such as North Mids have. And therefore, there isn't a pathway that you can say to a young referee, right, if you want to be the next Wayne Barnes, this is how it's going to work. Here's the process to follow, because ultimately that's bespoke to each society and each region, exactly how that looks, how that works. And that's not to say that that's necessarily
wrong or right. It's just, it is how it is. I think it would be helpful to have a clearer picture of what that pathway looks like. And I think certainly it would probably help in a few cases of people understanding what they've got to do to get there, and then help retain them as part of that, because they understand where they are on that process. But as always with the sport, I think you talk about like the YMOs who are coming in at 15. Well, so much can change between that age and when you'd be pushing through on an adult basis. If they're off to uni, do they get distracted by the beer, the girls, the other sports that they've got available, whatever it is? Are you changing societies, and therefore does it change the pathway you're on? So, if you look at, had I been someone on that pathway when I moved from North Mids to Oxfordshire, well, that pathway would have potentially looked quite different. So how does that help when you're trying to get a guy that's trying to push through and doesn't have the consistency of that message, perhaps? But I think then for the community referee, it's important that actually you can just engage with them and make them the best referee they can be, or they want to be. Level 6 is as high as we go in the society, before it sort of gets to that kind of regional approach. And from that point of view, I think it's good that we have the ability to sort of look after our own little group and make them sort of just how they want to be. And if that means getting to levels 6, 7, 8, whatever it is, that's absolutely fine. There's got to be a space in the structure for that as well. And sometimes I think, people are only pushed up the ladder in some societies because they've got the aspiration or the quality or the potential to get to that higher level. Is that always the right answer?
It's really interesting. There's a lot of factors there. In short, therefore, and for an idiot like me, are reffing stocks healthy and growing? Are they maintaining sort of a decent level, or are you worried about them?
I would say right now we don't have enough referees, if I'm being perfectly honest. If we look at appointments, we're not filling every appointment for every weekend in the way we'd like to. Again, if I touch back on sort of Chris's point, Chris Kears from Harborne, he was talking about the modern day of, players don't set aside Saturday now as their rugby day. They're available most of it, but if something comes up that you need to go and do on a Saturday, if you want to go to Twickers to watch the international, whatever it is, then you have a weekend off, and that can influence on the numbers. And you see the same kind of challenges really in the refereeing stocks as well. So, you kind of almost need a little bit of a surplus just to allow for that flexibility, and that's where we probably don't have that surplus. I think in terms of recruitment, the recruitment at younger age groups seems to be going really well. That YMO type program is thriving, and certainly in our society, I think there's a Granville Williams, who's our sort of nominated lead on that program, is doing a great job of keeping them engaged and working with them to make sure they're getting the games at the clubs and so on a Sunday morning. But that program's probably only been running sort of 2 to 3 years properly, if you like. And so we're not necessarily bearing the fruits of that labour when it comes to the adult games so much. And the key now is working, how do we build that YMO transition into adult rugby really, and make sure we keep them engaged.
So where do you feel the onus falls in getting more refs into the game? Is it something the RFU should be doing? Is it something that you, as a member of the local committee, needs to be out there selling the concept of it? How does the game get more people interested, committed to refereeing?
I think there has to be a bit of both. I don't think it's as simple as just putting ownership at one level or the other. I think obviously we have to engage with the clubs and sort of try and make sure they understand locally that we do want referees who perhaps they've got injured earlier in their career and want to come and join us, or perhaps they're just retiring and actually just want to be able to help out and do the occasional game, and make sure they realise that it isn't necessarily perhaps the level of commitment that you have as a player. Of course you have to have the fitness stuff, but you don't have to force that to be on your Tuesday or Thursday night training, for example. You do it in what works for you. But I do think it's not something that the RFU perhaps pushes as much as it could. Unfortunately, there will always be, rightly or wrongly, a stigma associated with the role of a referee, and not everyone's cut out for taking that on, of course. we are a little bit special in our own way, and as you said, put it in the bucket with the tax man. It is to a certain extent, and I think to a degree it always will be. No matter how much you try and say otherwise. I think that's just the nature of the beast.
It's interesting, isn't it? I can see where the problems crop up and then crop up actually very quickly. What about, I suppose, the role of the referee? Again, we're talking about how long you've been in the game. There are one or two, I suppose, growing opinions that rugby's getting closer to football and the respect the ref is being eroded by backchat and certainly at the top level of the game. Is that something you see on a weekly basis, or actually at a grassroots level, is that, I suppose, that protection around the ref still what it should be and what everybody wants it to be?
I can't sit here and say that I've never had those occasions where someone's gone too far, overstepped the mark and said stuff that they shouldn't have said on a pitch. But you also understand that when the players do that, it's usually a heat of the moment issue, and at the end of the day, we still sanction it far harder than football ever has, and we are still supported by all the disciplinary teams that don't stand for it. I think there's probably been a little bit more, not the abuse side of things, but a little bit more of the back chat type stuff creeping in. But I think, that's something that's still, for me, you couldn't pay me enough to referee a football game, from my side of things. And that's primarily for that reason. So personally, I think it's still in pretty good shape. And yeah, you get the occasional flare up, you get the occasional heat of the moment stuff. And of course, you're always going to get stuff from behind the barrier. And as long as it's from behind the barrier and not within the playing area, then you just get on with it. That's you can't, that's outside your remit, if you like.
You are a special breed as a collective, in the way that you kind of suck that up and deal with it. So, two questions to sort of sum up, I suppose. Really, what would you say to 14-year-olds coming up the ranks like you did, and those who are interested in becoming referees now? Where do they go? How do they get involved? How are they going to get looked after? And why should they do it?
I think for me, I thoroughly enjoy refereeing, and I think if you don't enjoy it, you don't do it. And I think people sometimes surprise themselves starting out on this path that they're like, well, I'll do it because I'll give it a go kind of thing, and then actually surprise themselves. But then there's always those that don't give it a go because they're not sure. And for me, I'd always say to people, give it a go, have a run around, one afternoon. You'll get the support from the RFU and from the societies around the country. In terms of how to get involved, get onto the RFU website. There's all the course information's on there, so you can find a course that's running local to you. But even before you've qualified, contact your local society. Just Google it. So get involved and get down and understand it a bit better, and give it a go. Because for me, I think it's a great way of giving back to the game as well. It's a good way of keeping yourself active and out of trouble at a weekend, and more importantly, you avoid the shopping on the Saturday afternoon if you can.
Very wise. I was going to ask you, actually, has being a referee helped you during the 10 weeks of lockdown? Have you found yourself marching your wife back 10 yards for back chat and reversing decisions because she's come in for the wrong side or whatever it might be? Has it been useful, that level-headedness?
No, I couldn't possibly go down that route, Alex. It's from that point of view. Yeah, well, it's more that the 10 yards would probably take her out the garden and down the street, and don't want to risk that. But no, it's certainly I've appreciated the fact that having the refereeing has meant that I've wanted to get out and do some runs and just keeping the fitness going, because and it sort of gives you an incentive to do that a little bit more. Final
question: where do you think grassroots rugby will be in 5 years' time? I mean, I'd love to know your view on that, given that the game doesn't happen without refs, given some of the concerns you've addressed, but also some of the reasons why people should do it. Where will grassroots rugby be from your view in 2, 3, 5, 10 years' time?
I think grassroots rugby is always, it's there to stay. I think the question for me actually right now is what's the landscape going to look like in terms of post-coronavirus and number of clubs, and the financial situation for those clubs, and trying to make sure as many of those are still there and supported. The challenges we see now on the modern way of working, of being more sort of not so religious in your Saturdays or Sundays or whatever else in terms of availability will always continue to be there. I think as a result, we're always going to have a sort of challenge, if you like, to a degree of juggling those priorities for individuals. I think, for me, the grassroots is critical to supporting any sport, and I think we're going to have the volume of people involved. It's just whether you'll see the volume of games because of that sort of balance of modern life priorities, and that will impact refereeing in the same way as it's impacting the clubs and their team availability.
Yeah, interesting. Let's hope there is positivity and, I suppose, the green grass on the other side of all of this. But Rob, it's been really, really interesting to chat, actually. And I know you guys and girls who give up your Saturdays to do it don't always get a lot of love, but it is worth reminding everybody that it doesn't happen without you. And although you are a special breed, as you eloquently put it, you're a very important breed as well. So thank you for your time and your thoughts.
It's pleasure.
Really interesting to chat. Good man. Thank you very much indeed to Rob Cross. That is it for this week. Actually, just before we go, I have actually just doodled down. I wonder whether Haskins and I should come and do a ref's course at some point. It'd be bloody funny, if nothing else. I dread to think what kind of a referee Haskell would be. But perhaps there's something in that. I don't know if you run courses, etc. But it would be quite an entertaining exercise, if nothing else.
You'd be absolutely welcome to give us a shout, and more than happy to help facilitate that.
I can already imagine
for the entertainment.
I can already imagine what his reaction will be. But maybe we should put our money where our mouth is. If he's going to bash referees, then we should perhaps step into the firing line as well. Who knows? Good man, Rob. Thank you very much. As we said, that's it for this week. Thank you, as always, for watching and listening to House of Rugby Shorts. We're a podcast, we're a YouTube show, and that's where you're going to find this week's main episode with the Sarries, England and Lions hooker, Mr. Jolly Jamie George. And he's talking about rebuilding Sarries, coffee, and why Ellis Genge hates Cirque du Soleil. It was a lot of fun, that one, actually. Don't forget, you can also dip into our entire back catalogue. That's available on both mediums. We've also got a very popular Facebook group, which you might want to get involved with if you're not already. There's an Instagram page for you, @RugbyJoe. And you can download the new interview podcast series, Sports Pages, as well. That's on iTunes or your podcast app. Thank you once again to Rob. Have a good rest of the week. And thank you for your time and interesting views. We'll be back next Wednesday when we are joined by one very special guest from Down Under. Guess who? We'll be seeing you then. But from all of us for now, it's goodbye.
You've been watching the House of Rugby on Joe, together with Guinness. Drink responsibly. Visit drinkaware.co.uk for the facts.